Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Film Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, the title of it gives it away. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about everything: development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the ingredients that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. Now, what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the Film Stories podcast, where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their body of work or a film that just happens to be being released at the time I'm putting an episode together. And it's the latter that's the case here, that I'm here to talk about the new supernatural horror movie, coming of age film, The Black Phone, which has been directed by Scott Derrickson. He co-wrote the screenplay along with his regular collaborator, C. Robert Cargill, and it's based on Joe Hill's novella, The Black Phone. Now, Scott Derrickson joined me for a conversation about this film, and unusually for this podcast, it's a spoilery one. We don't get heavily into spoilers, but we go into things that I think you'd rather not know before you saw the movie. As such, I've held back the release of this podcast until a good week after the film has been playing in cinemas. So at the point this is being released, at the end of, well, the start of July 2022, the film is playing widely in cinemas in the UK, in the US, and so it feels a little bit fairer and a little bit safer just to release this particular podcast episode now. So a little bit of background on the film that, as I said, adapted from Joe Hill's novella. And the movie sees Scott Derrickson returning back to work with producer Jason Blum and his Blumhouse Productions. Now, Derrickson had made his film Sinister with Blumhouse before. And one of the upsides of working with Blumhouse and Jason Blum is you tend to get creative control over your project. And in the case of The Black Phone, what you're going to hear in my conversation with Scott Derrickson is that creative control extends to the release of the film as well. During that particular conversation, we touch on the movie Deliver Us From Evil that was released by Sony and the release of that. Scott Derrickson also touches on the ending of Sinister. He doesn't go into great big huge detail on it. He also mentions just a small plot point from his Marvel movie Doctor Strange that he directed, that was also co-written by C. Robert Cargill. And The Black Phone was the film that ultimately Derrickson made instead of pursuing the follow-up to that, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I don't get into that really. This isn't a Marvel movie podcast or conversation or anything like that. I was more interested in the decisions and the filmmaking decisions that Derrickson made in and around the film of The Black Phone. So the cast of this one is led by Mason Thames, Madeline McGraw, Ethan Hawke, Jeremy Davis, E. Roger Mitchell, Troy Rudseal and James Ransoni. They round out the main ensemble for the movie. And so what I'm going to do to set this up is I'm just going to play you a clip from the trailer for the film, and then we'll go straight into my conversation with Scott Derrickson the other side of this. This is your last warning on it, that there are a couple of spoilery moments in this conversation, and so if you've not seen The Black Phone yet, and I recommend heavily you go in cold, I had an absolute blast with the movie, then this is a good chance to press pause, head off to your local multiplex, watch the film, get yourself a drink on the way back, and then load the podcast back up. Here's the clip.
I'll be home in the morning.
Where are you going?
I'm staying over at Susie's tonight.
What's new? The flyer.
The papers call him the grabber.
I wish you wouldn't call him that.
You don't actually believe that story, do you? Because he can't hear you, and he doesn't really take kids that safe.
Oh, you goof. Wasn't that just peachy keen?
You need some help?
You see that?
Yeah.
Would you hand me my hat? Yes, sir. I am a part-time magician.
Are those black balloons in there?
Would you like to see a magic trick?
I have an announcement to make. One of our students, Finney Blake, was abducted.
What if I could help the police find Finney?
That then was a clip from The Black Phone. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined in this podcast special by its director, Scott Derrickson. He's co-writer as well, I should point out as well. Scott, how are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you very much. It's hot, but I'm coping. So I wonder if I can start with, in the most logical place, with the Mike Mills film 20th Century Women that he made back, I think he released back in 2016. And what I remember vividly about that was when they were doing the promotion for that film, he said that he'd set that movie in the 1970s because it put it in a place where modern technology couldn't touch it. And appreciating you're working from a source novella that I've just been reading and an analog phone, was that kind of boundary and appeal for you, that kind of analog, the analog restrictions?
Not the restrictions. That wasn't of any import to me whatsoever. You know, the way that we ended up with that was, you know, I had read the short story when it was first published. Always thought it was a great idea for a movie. My writing partner, I gave it to him. He read it. He thought it was a great idea for a movie. We just didn't know how to expand it into a feature.
Yeah.
And then I had spent 3 years in therapy, really dealing with my own traumatic childhood. There was a lot of violence in my childhood, my neighborhood, my school, my home, and I came up with the idea of, well, what if we took the time and place when I was 12 years old, where I was at in my life and in the neighborhood I grew up in, and combine that with The Black Phone. And when I pitched that to Cargill, it was like a eureka moment. He was like, oh, that's the movie, you know, and that's essentially what the movie is. It's a really a combination of my own memories, kids that I knew, what that time and place was like, combining with Joe's brilliant short story.
It's I find it interesting because I've done interviews with you in the past in a different life in my Den of Geek days, and I've read quite a lot of interviews with you, and you seem to be asked, even when you're not making horror films, consistently about horror films, that the questions you were getting were horror tinged. I just wonder if here's an opportunity to reverse that slightly, that whilst The Black Phone feels like it's under the umbrella of horror, if we've got to categorize it, you're doing an awful lot underneath that. You know, I saw a coming of age story in here. I saw a thriller in here, and I just saw you having fun again with what you could do. And I just wonder if you can talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's combining a lot of things. I mean, Joe, let's start with Joe's story. Joe's story, and the reason why I thought Joe's story was so wonderful was it did three things that were very deceptively unusual. One, it was a serial killer movie. And it combined that with two, a ghost story. I hadn't seen that effectively done before. And then three, it was told with so much empathy and compassion for Finney. Yeah. And so the feeling that gave me alone, I thought, well, this is already a kind of interesting hybrid thing. Such grim, dark material, but handled with such a point of view of love. Then, you know, the starting point, actually, before we didn't start with Joe's story. After I had been, you know, unearthing all this stuff from my past and sort of reckoning with it as an adult, what I first thought about doing was trying to make an American 400 Blows. You know, I think, you know, interesting. Truffaut's, you know, autobiographical movie about his own childhood, and I think that kid is maybe the best child performance ever put on screen, and I got excited about the idea of doing that. But I didn't feel like my childhood was interesting enough in itself to be a movie. And then it was the thought of taking what is a coming of age story and my own coming of age in that time and place, and combining it with Joe's work. And so, yeah, there are a lot of layers. And then the thrill of the writing process was that I think we found a pretty seamless way to weave them all, to interlace them all and make them all work together.
The one constant that I see right throughout your filmmaking work is this relationship you've got with C. Robert Cargill, to the point where I really love filmmakers who name check other people and give credit to other people in their interviews, and you're consistent about that. Could you capture what's special about that, about what's made that working relationship work so well for so long for us?
Well, he's, you know, I just got married. He was the best man at my wedding. You know,
congratulations, first of all.
Thank you. We're really close friends, you know, and I think that what works is that, you know, we have a lot in common. There's a lot of things we agree on, but we really do approach life and certainly writing from a different perspective. And there's just, you know, It's like I just watched the Scorsese documentary on the Rolling Stones. I'd never seen it before, and in that documentary, the interviewers asked Keith Richards, who's a better guitarist, you or Robbie? And Keith Richards says, "Oh, we're both shit, but put us together, and we're better than any other 10 guitar players." And I kind of feel that way about Cargo. I don't think either one of us could write a screenplay on our own that's half as good as the stuff that we do together. And so there's a real ability that we both have to check the other person on what doesn't work, because it's an egoless relationship. I don't need to be right about anything, neither does he. And we, I bring a kind of metaphysical view of the world. I bring a very, very unusual, I think, visual sensibility in how I see what I'm going to write, because I'm seeing it, how I'm going to make it. And I bring a structural strength of storytelling. He brings character knowledge. He brings character instinct. He brings dialogue that, a lot of the best dialogue that has been in our movies is straight from him. I think, the death of the Ancient One in Doctor Strange is one of the best scenes that I've filmed in my career. He wrote that scene by himself. It was all him. And he just showed up in pages one day, and I was like, my God, this is brilliant. It's wonderful.
I mean, can I go to, I'm going to spoil a light, but can I go to an early scene you've got in The Black Phone? Because I came to this completely cold. It's only now I've just read the novella just before we've come on now. And there's an early scene, just to set the scene for listeners of this, that takes place in a school bathroom. And I thought it was a really interesting lesson in varying power dynamics between characters, not least what happens at the end of the scene, where the dynamic changed in a way I wasn't quite expecting. And I get the sense throughout your writing, yours and C. Robert Carger's writing, that that's something that really interests you as much as a writer and as a director. And I wonder if you can just talk to that a little bit, because right throughout the film, I see power dynamics just slightly shifting.
I think one of the reasons why I'm a good writer or half of a good writing team is because I did, when I was in undergraduate college, I studied acting, and I studied and I studied acting with a great teacher who had been the head of the drama department at Yale for years, and his approach, he was very much of the Uta Hagen School of Acting, and he really believed that every scene, every dialogue scene, whether we would workshop Chekhov or do something modern by Tennessee Williams, whatever, and something even Shakespeare, going into the classics. He really believed that every conversation, everything that happened on the stage was a power struggle.
Yeah.
He really believed that there is a power dynamic and a power struggle going on in every conversation that everyone ever has. And I think that that's a little bit of an overstatement, but I also think it's fundamentally true, and that the power dynamic between people is always at play. Always. It's never not at play. And how hard you lean into it depends on how hard one or both or several characters are themselves leaning into it in those moments, or feeling it in those moments. And I think that it makes for good drama. Certainly that's what drama is, conflict, and conflict comes from exactly that, a power dynamic between characters. And so whether it's the breakup scene between Benedict and Rachel McAdams in Doctor Strange, that's a power dynamic fight that they have. And those are the scenes I like the most. The scene, the domestic fight between Ellison Oswalt and his wife in the third act of Sinister is a showcase an amazing acting between those two, and that is a pure power dynamic fight. That's what that is, and that's where good drama comes from.
Also, you seem to be having fun with expectation for us on our side of the screen as well, because I've been reminded for the second time this week about the early stages of John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. And again, go spoiler free for people who haven't seen that. There's an incident right near the start of that film that involves an act of violence towards a child. That after that made me think that everything and everyone was in danger for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
And you lean into that really heavily in the early stages of that film. So I wonder, was part of that to unsettle us, or was it also what you were saying before about leaning into what you were bringing to the film?
It's a very astute question, and the answer is not. It's neither of those things. It was all in. It was really all in service of one thing, which is that I knew that the emotional core of this movie was this relationship and bond between Finney and Gwen, between this 12-year-old kid and his 9-year-old sister, and they are separated on page 26, I believe, of the script, and don't see each other again until the very end. That's very spoilery, so cut that out if this is released before the movie is released. But you know, what I knew is that I've got 26 pages to build a bond between these two that is so powerful and so rich and so meaningful to the viewer and to the audience, that we love these two, that we love this relationship, we love how they look out for each other, we love their friendship. And so all of the elements that occur in Act One, every one of them is ultimately in service of that story. They're all things that allow the way that Finney stands up to his dad, in a sense, you know, when Gwen is getting whipped and calls for him to stop and stands his ground and has that fierce look on his face. And then the way Gwen turns around and literally rescues him from the bullies, you know, by splitting open one of the kids' heads with a rock, you know, and all things that I saw growing up. You know, it's very typical kind of fight experience in the world of bullying in North Denver in the late 70s. But all of those things were to make us feel the bond between these two and to care about it, so that when he gets taken and she is so desperate to find him, and that she's utilizing these, you know, paranormal gifts that she has, that we're really feeling a sense of hope and fear throughout the movie. All tension, all suspense is about playing on hope and fear for the audience. Get the audience to hope one thing will happen and fear that something else will. And so the whole movie, you're hoping that Gwen is going to be able to find him in time, and you're fearing that he's going to become another victim like the grabber. And if audiences have seen Sinister, they'll know that I'm not afraid to end a movie very bleakly, you know. So
I agree with that. Yeah.
there's no guarantee that this is going to work out well, you know. But that, to get to, that's a long-winded answer, but all of that setup, every bit of struggle, every bit of dynamic you know, events, every dynamic event that happens in the first act is all in service to building that bond, so that we care about these two kids when they are separated. Because even though they're separated for most of the film, it doesn't feel like that. They feel very connected.
And did you change the age dynamic from the book as well? Have I read that right?
No, the sister's a minor character. She doesn't do much, and she's older. Yeah,
that's what I meant. What was the thinking between making her younger than him in this? I think it's really effective. I'm just curious why you made the switch.
Well, I think that Gwen, you know, Gwen's the one. Once I had this idea of combining my own childhood with, you know, with Joe's story, great. I knew all the ghost kids. They're each based on a kid that I knew, and with that, I had a story that was all boys. There's no central female character in the movie at all. And I didn't do it, you know, for woke purposes or anything, but I was just like, this story doesn't want to be a male enterprise. And I thought, I want the soul of the movie to be a female character. I want the heart and soul to really be a female character. And I just felt like by making her so young and yet so powerful in her willfulness and her audacity and in the way she speaks to the cops and the way that she, you know, stands up to the bullies, I just felt like having her have these qualities and be so young made her a remarkable character, a really memorable character, and a character who, you know, is the funniest character in the movie. You know, the biggest laugh the movie gets is, again, a spoiler, but when, you know, she goes to pray the second time, and it starts with, Jesus, what the fuck? You know, she doesn't even, she talks back even to Jesus, you know. She doesn't really want to take shit from anybody. And I just think that's a really fascinating character to be at the center of a movie that is all where everyone else is an older boy.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's quite a few things in this film that I've not really seen done that way before, and she was certainly one of them. And I'm curious as to the build-up to it as well, because I think we talked to you around the time of Doctor Strange, and you were talking then about how it was 3,000 pieces of concept art or something before you'd shot a frame of footage. And I just wonder where, at this stage in your career now, what building a film, what the process of building a film like this, how much of it is in the pre-production, because the production design of this is quite glorious and very tinged brown and 70s.
Yeah, it's I'm very meticulous in pre-production. You know, by the time we went to shoot, by the time we went to shoot, you know, actually roll the camera on the black phone, I felt like I had made the movie in my mind. Literally, I either storyboarded or shot listed every single shot in the movie with Brett, my wonderful cinematographer.
Yeah,
and I had really obsessed about the mask and getting the mask right, and was very, very obsessive about that basement and how we could make it in such a way that it wouldn't become tedious and boring down there, you know. So for me, you know, production is just kind of the least enjoyable part of making a movie. It's just the grueling work of actualizing what has already been prepared. But I will say this though, I also think that movie making requires a constant, in production, and this is the part of production I love, a constant openness, listening to the movie. What does it really want to be? How does it want to be different? You know, in the script, Robin doesn't appear at the end. He just calls. He's just another voice on the phone. Yeah. And it was 2 days before we were going to shoot that scene. I was shooting something else, and it hit me like a lightning bolt in the forehead. I was like, the audience has to see Robin again. They want to see Robin again.
Yeah.
And we had already flown that kid back to Texas or Arizona or wherever he lives. And I was like, I stopped shooting and I went to the producer. I was like, you got to get Robin back. With that last scene, he has to be in the room for that phone call. And you know, I was so busy shooting. The morning of that we were scheduled to shoot that scene rolled around, and I hadn't thought 5 seconds about how to shoot it. So I had the kid there, and I had to sit there and figure out how am I going to block and stage this. And I, you know, I did it on the fly, and it ended up being a single take. We had to do 22 takes to get it right, but it's like 4 pages of dialogue in one visual take. And I think it's probably the most cinematic moment of the movie, you know? So I think good directing is maximum preparation meeting maximum flexibility and open-mindedness. And if you have both things working at full volume, you have the greatest potential of making something that has real movie magic.
So I'm nearly out of time, and we've talked about the before and we've talked about the filming. I just wonder if we can go to the after a little bit as well, because going back to that bathroom scene, for instance, I just wonder in the edit room just how long you were. I mean, you're clearly confident about playing that scene long, but if that was ever under some degree of discussion about bringing that down, for instance, and taking some of the space out. And then also, I remember talking to you just after Deliver Us from Evil came out, and one of the conversations we had there was over control of the movie's release and when it was marketing and setting a date. And I just wonder how that shifted for you and in your career as well.
Yeah, I you know, Jason Blum gives me maximum protection. You know, he tells me things that he thinks I should do differently, and if I tell him I don't want to do that, he's like, it's your movie. You know, he just lets me do what I want to do. And I think on this movie, that was the case all the way up through the marketing, in that I signed off on every ad. I was the one who pushed for the release date to be moved from from February to the summer. They moved. Now, Delivers from Evil tested higher than any movie I've ever made.
I remember.
And they moved it to summer, and I thought it was a mistake. I remember thinking, I don't think this is a summer movie, but hey, The Conjuring did well, and they thought they had The Conjuring, and it was, and that was something, and I thought the poster was abysmal, one of the worst movie posters I've ever seen. And those were things that I could give input in, but I didn't have any power in this case. Jason has really come to trust me in my own instincts about things, and I've been really captain of the ship the whole way. Where Jason has been so helpful is it like a bodyguard to the movie, making sure that I get everything that I need. And in the marketing, he's really pushed Universal to get behind this campaign because of the quality of the movie, which they have.
And I really enjoyed the film as well. I went in knowing absolutely zero about it, hadn't watched a trailer or anything. And I think you've got quite a film on your hands there. Scott Derrickson, I wish we could talk for longer, but thank you so much for your time and the very best to you. And that was my conversation with Scott Derrickson about the film The Black Phone, which is playing in cinemas around the world at the moment this podcast is being released. And that, for now, brings me to the end of this special episode of Film Stories. Thank you for listening and thank you for your time. If I've not bored the life out of you, you can find more from me on Twitter at Simon Brew. You can find more from the entire Film Stories project on Twitter as well at Film Stories Pod. If you head to our website, filmstories.co.uk, that's updated every weekday with movie news and reviews and features and things like that. Store.filmstories.co.uk is where you can buy our Film Stories print magazines and our Film Junior print magazines as well. At the point this podcast is being released, we are deep into productions on Film Stories issue 35, or up to 35, and also Film Junior issue 10. Very proud of both of those, and they'll be with you soon. That store is also where you can pick up our Sneakers Blu-ray, which is available in the UK with new extra features as well. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline and youtube.com/filmstories. But I think that's enough plugs. I think that's enough web links given out on a podcast that you've got no intention of typing into your device, although thank you very much if you do, but I know how podcasts work. Main thing is you all take care and look after yourselves. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. Until then, as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for your time. You all look after yourselves and I'll be back soon. Bye-bye.